And you see always the same formula which is recurrent in those texts. It is to be slave of epitumion kai edonon, or to be free from epitumion kai edonon. So, desire and pleasure is something like an entity which is not, which cannot be dissociated. And as you know very well, in the psychoanalytical literature, to speak about pleasure is something rather vulgar. But if you want to be a real sophisticated psychoanalyst, you have to speak about desire. There is an under-evaluation of pleasure, which is very striking in this kind of literature. Well, anyway, one of my targets in studying those techniques of the self is how, and to understand how and why the problem of desire became so important, whereas the problem of desire and pleasure was important in the Greco-Roman antiquity. The problem in the Greco-Roman antiquity is what to do with our pleasure, how to have this pleasure, at what extent, inside which limits, and so on and so on. It was really a problem of pleasure and the use of pleasure. If you look at if you read books, I speak for myself. I never read Chinese book about the erotic art, but I have read books about this, and the very interesting book written by Van Gulik. I don't know if you read, which is very, very, very interesting. And you see that that problem was not at all the problem of desire. The problem of the Chinese erotic art was the problem of pleasure, how to take the pleasure, with which intensity, and so on and so on. And I think that we are a civilization, maybe the civilization, where the problem of desire became much more important than the problem of pleasure. And what's the reason? Why we recognize ourselves as subject of desire and not as agent of pleasure. Why our theory of sex, sexuality, existence, theory of human being, the problem of anthropology and so on, well, anthropology as a philosophical anthropology, deals with problem of desire, the nature of the male desire, of the female desire, and so on, and the problem of pleasure has the smallest part in our theorization, reflection, and ethics. And that's the problem I wanted to analyze, and I think that this slow move from the conception of mastership you can find as a main problem of ethics in the 4th century to the deciphering of the self in the early Christianity is the move through which the problem of desire is become prevalent, because in the deciphering of the self, the problem is, what is my desire? Do I have a desire? Which is the orientation? What is the orientation of my desire? And so on. The hermeneutics of the self, the rise of the hermeneutics of the self, and the prevalence of desire as the main feature of the human, not only the human sexuality, but the human being, the human existence. I think that is something which is really important. Whereas for the Greeks of the 4th century, the problem was the mastership of oneself, which is the limitation of pleasure. Limitation of pleasure, deciphering of desire. I think that's two kinds, not only of theory of ethics, but two kinds of relationship to oneself.
Just this afternoon about that the principle of this discipline is not that everyone's more and more obedient, but that rationality, the principle of this discipline is a rationality, a more economic or efficient means of getting people to do what you want them to do. And I just wondered if you think that the culture of the self has facilitated the spread of discipline throughout society, in the sense that in a way, we're very interested in knowing ourselves and figuring out what would be best for ourselves. And so we're very willing to say, talk to psychoanalysts and confess certain things about ourselves, those confessions then become material for, say, social theory or psychological theory, and which in turn can, can be used to determine how to take care of people better, how to govern people better, how to get what you want out of them better. In other words, doesn't the culture of the self, because we want to comply in a way and find out about ourselves, doesn't that enhance the possibilities for rationality involved in discipline? As far as throughout society. I haven't said that very well.
You asked me if this development of the techniques of the self is not kind of improvement, reinforcement of disciplines? Is that the question now? I didn't catch it.
Maybe to turn it around a little bit, whether the culture of the self, in the sense that we're very interested in this hermeneutics of the self, and finding out about the ways to know ourselves, doesn't that sort of provide a foothold or something like that, a place for disciplinary mechanisms to come in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Sure, but it depends the way in which you do this deciphering of the self. For instance, when this deciphering of the self takes the shape of the Christian penance, for example, Catholic penance, yes, of course, the disciplinary effects are very explicit and strong. In the psychoanalytical techniques, in the psychoanalytical practice, for instance, I think that the disciplinary effects, I would like to be prudent in this way, but the disciplinary effects are not so evident. I don't say that they do not exist, but it's not so evident as in the... But I don't know if it's an answer to your question.
Suzanne.
But maybe I become a little tired and I do not understand
Perhaps
very
we
well.
should have maybe one or two more.
Wait, one or two, excuse me, but we started at 11 o'clock this morning. So.
Yeah. Susanna, why don't you take it?
Please.
I wanted to know if you could share with us how much your work on sexuality will illuminate different genealogies for the world of men and for women. And to what degree the distinctions you've been drawing today can in fact be appropriately used in the study of the past and women in, say, Greek times and so on. I don't think the model would look, I know you're not trying to create a golden age, but it probably would look even drearier today.
Yeah, sure.
You were able to find enough documents to not let this simply be a speculative history of silence.
Yeah.
Are you going to try and come to grips with different kinds of genealogies for men and for women?
Well, the question is very important. First of all, you are quite right. The Greek period was not at all a golden age for sex life, even for gay people, if you can use this category from the Greek society, which I doubt a lot. But anyway, it was hard for everybody. The second point I wanted to underline is that what I want to do in this study about history of sexuality is not the history of the behavior or the pattern of behavior, of the rules for the behavior. It's not a social history of the sexual behavior. It's the way by which our civilization has integrated the problem of sex inside the problem of truth, or in which way the problem of truth and the problem of sex have been linked together. And this leads, of course, to psychoanalysis, but that leads also to the problem of Christianity, for instance, and when they consider the sin of the flesh as the main sin you could do, and that your real purity of soul is linked to your obscure sexual desire or concupiscence. So you see, that's my problem. It's not a problem of social history. It's a problem of thought. Sex as thought in its relation to truth, to individual truth. And in this story, it's a fact that the main role has been run by males, and only by males, since the theory of sex, the rules for the techniques of the self, the rules of sexual behavior and so on, has been imposed by a male society, and by a male civilization. So I think that this history of the linkage, you can say that, of truth and sex, has to be done from the point of view of male. But of course, you could also, and I think that has to be done, see the effects of that on the sexual experience, or the pleasure experience, or the self-experience of women. But that would be something else, you see. And of course, it's quite different. I don't know if it's enough as an answer.
Do you feel up to one more?
One more.
Okay.
Now that we've gotten around to truth, given the fact that you don't try and refute theories that you idolize, that you don't even consider the truth value of the theories, given the fact that you claim not to be a structuralist, that you claim not to be giving deeper meaning or making a hermeneutics, and that you don't appeal to a totality, why should we believe you?
There is no reason.
Well, having erased the last 2 hours, I want to thank Monsieur Foucault for a very enlightening